Welcome back to Chasing Shadows. I'm your host, Mark Miners. Throw on your headphones, pull that chair a little closer to the glow of your screen, because tonight, on our 20th episode, we're going somewhere most people never dare to look. We're going inside the human mind, to a place where distance means nothing, where walls dissolve, and where a single thought can carry you across continents, or across the void between stars. Tonight, we chase the shadow of something the government spent 20 years and $20 million trying to weaponize, and then buried so deep, most people think it's science fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the strange, seductive, and sometimes terrifying world of remote viewing. Let me take you back to a quiet laboratory in California, 1972. A painter, an artist who saw auras around people since childhood, a man named Ingo Swann, sits blindfolded in a dimly lit room at Stanford Research Institute. Across from him are two physicists who should know better, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. On the table between them is a small metal box. Inside that box is a target Swann has never seen and will never see with his eyes. And yet, in less than 4 minutes, he describes it perfectly. Color, shape, the way the light hits it, even the tiny scratch on one corner. And that was only the warm-up. 6 months later, in the spring of 1973, Ingo Swann did something that was simply out of this world. While sitting in the same lab, he described in real time the surface of Jupiter. He spoke of a ring of dust and ice so faint it was invisible to every telescope on Earth. 6 years later, in 1979, Voyager 1 swung past Jupiter and sent back the first photographs of that ring, exactly as Swann had drawn it years earlier. Now, some of you are already thinking it was a coincidence. Some of you are thinking hoax. And very few of you are leaning forward because you've felt it happen to you. You know who was calling before the phone rang. You've seen a place in a dream and then stood in that place weeks later. You already know we're capable of more than they tell us in school. Tonight, we're going all the way down that rabbit hole. For the next 23 years, from secret offices in Fort Meade, Maryland, a unit inside the Defense Intelligence Agency ran one of the most bizarre programs in Cold War history. Code names changed like masks. Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, and finally, Stargate. Their mission? Use the human mind as a reconnaissance asset. No satellites, no spies, just a viewer, a piece of paper, and coordinates written on a card. Viewer 001, the man who started it all, was Ingo Swann. He was followed by men and women you've never heard of. Joe McMoneagle, Pat Price, Angela Della Fiora, Lynn Buchanan. People who could close their eyes in Maryland and tell you what was inside of a filing cabinet in a KGB office in Moscow, or the exact layout of a hostage compound in Iran, or, in one now declassified session, the location of a downed Soviet spy plane in the African jungle, found exactly where the viewer said it would be, down to the tree it was tangled in. And every time they succeeded, another layer of reality was peeled back. I want you to really think about that. While we were watching the Berlin Wall fall on television, a handful of people in a windowless building were watching it with their minds, sometimes days before it happened. But the story gets darker. In his 1998 book Penetration, Ingo Swann claimed that somewhere around 1975, he was approached by a man known only as Mr. Axelrod, a handler from an agency so black it didn't appear on any org chart. Axelrod took Swann blindfolded to an underground facility somewhere in the American Southwest. There, Swann was asked to view something else. Not a Soviet base, not a terrorist cell. It was a location on the far side of the moon. What he describes still circulates in quiet corners of the internet. Structures, towers, lights that moved with purpose. Beings that noticed he was watching and looked back. Swann wrote that one of them turned toward him telepathically and said, "He's not cleared for this." He came out of the sessions shaking. He never worked with Axelrod again. Whether you believe that part or not, something changed in Ingo Swann after that night. He began warning that humanity was being monitored, and that the monitors did not want us developing these abilities. Let me tell you about the session that still makes hardened scientists shift in their seats. April 27th, 1973. Ingo Swann, relaxed in a chair at Stanford Research Institute, is handed a set of coordinates, nothing more. No planet name, no hint, just latitude and longitude, pointed at Jupiter. Over the next 20 minutes, Swann describes in real time a thin, faint ring of dust and ice encircling the planet. Storms the size of Earth swirling in reddish-brown bands. A magnetosphere so powerful it would fry any spacecraft that goes too close. He even sketches the ring, a delicate, barely there halo. At the time, every astronomer on Earth would have laughed at the idea of a ring around Jupiter. Gas giants like Saturn had rings. Jupiter, there was no evidence for that. 6 years later, March 1979, Voyager 1 sends back the first close-up images of Jupiter. And there it is, exactly as Swann drew it. A faint ring of dust and microscopic ice particles, invisible from Earth. The session is on record, the transcript is public. The sketches are in the SRI archives. And it still stands as one of the cleanest, most verified hits of the entire Stargate program. Now, you're going to hear a story that's even more dramatic. That remote viewer Pat Price described Pluto's moon Charon years before Jim Christie discovered it at the U.S. Naval Observatory in 1978. He even gave it the name Charon. It's a beautiful legend. It's repeated in books, documentaries, and 1,000 late-night forums. But here's the truth, and I'm only going to say this once so we keep the record straight. Pat Price died in 1975, 3 years before Christie's discovery. There is no declassified session, no transcript, no sketch, where Price or any Stargate viewer names or clearly describes Charon ahead of time. The story grew after the fact, like the way a campfire tale does. What we do have are other sessions, less flashy but still documented, where viewers described small companions or faint objects near outer planets long before telescopes confirmed them. Those hits are real, but they're quieter. They don't come with a Hollywood name attached. So we let the Charon myth go. We don't need it. The Jupiter ring session alone is enough to keep the lights on in my house for a month. Because when a man sitting in California in 1973 can draw something that won't be photographed until 1979, well, that's the kind of shadow worth chasing for the rest of your life. In 1995, the CIA finally pulled the plug on Stargate. The official report said the program produced no actionable intelligence of value. But the declassified performance evaluations tell a different story. 85% accuracy on some targets. Multiple confirmed operational successes. Viewers locating hostages, downed pilots, and hidden weapon caches. So why shut it down? Some say budget cuts. Others say certain people didn't want the public knowing how far we had already gone. But here's the thing they couldn't kill. The viewers kept viewing. Many of them went public. They taught classes. They wrote books. And to this day, on quiet forums and private Discord servers, new generations are picking up where Stargate left off. So is it happening today? The evidence says yes. Not in Langley basements, or maybe it is, because, shadows are gonna shadow. But in labs, apps, and living rooms, conferences clocking hits, journals crunching numbers. It's evolved. Less spy games, more self-mastery, laced with AI. And Stargate's ghost, it lingers in the protocols. The pros like McMonagall are still teaching. But here's the chill. If Swann was right, and they don't want us peeking, why is it all so accessible now? Coincidence? Or the real op is to train the masses and harvest the data. So here we are, 20 episodes of chasing shadows together. And tonight the shadow looked back. Because if even 1% of this is true, if the mind can truly leave the body, if it can travel across time and space with nothing more than intention, then everything we've been told about who we are is a lie. And maybe that's the real secret they tried to bury. If tonight's journey left you staring at the ceiling, wondering what you might see if you closed your eyes and let go, do me a favor. Like the episode if you enjoyed it. Subscribe so I can continue growing my channel. Drop your own remote viewing experience or your questions in the comments. I read every one. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep your mind open, and if you close your eyes and count to 10, what will you begin to see? Good night.